Skylanders Trap Team was released in 2014 and gave us one of the coolest and possibly the best gimmick in the franchise, being able to trap and play as the enemies you defeat. Within the main story and expansion levels, there are 46 trappable and playable villains, from the powerful Doom Raiders such as Wolfgang and Golden Queen to a simple and classic Chompy. You are able to use them once you defeat and capture them with a corresponding element trap. Then you can make them stronger. Each villain has their own quest that you can complete to boost their damage output and change their design. Of these 46 trappable villains, some are definitely better than others once you get to use them. So today, I'll be ranking every trappable villain from Skylanders Trap Team. But this ranking isn't from favorite to least favorite. It's based on how good they are in-game. They'll be judged via their moveset, damage, and overall usefulness. After that's done, they'll be placed in a tier list from S to D, S being the best, D being the worst. To do this, I played as all the villains and thoroughly used all their moves. Okay, now that you know how this video will go, let's get started. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Starting us off, we have Sheep Creep. Sheep Creep has two moves: double blasters that never run out of ammo, but they do low damage, and an explode move that creates a small stun to anyone close, dealing minimal damage. Overall, he's fun sometimes, he's kind of goofy, but he's not very useful. The Gulper. He's the definition of being fine. Like, just good enough to use, but still not good. His primary attack is a fine damage trident strike, single hit, slow in between. Then he has a slide move where the water damages enemies, but doesn't really damage them that much. And then he has a bite, which is like a bad version of Thumpback. Tussle Sprout. He's got two moves, a Cloud Burst and a Hail Mary Lob Throw. Both are very weak, but they do infect the enemies and do damage over time. But it's just not that much damage. Now on to another very small trappable villain that'll really surprise you on how good they are, Buzzerbeak. Buzzerbeak's main attack is a decent damage spin attack that actually has a really good area of effect. And then they have a jump slam attack where it does great damage but leaves you a little vulnerable. Slobber Trap. He has two moves, a decent damage belly flop but it makes you super vulnerable, and a slobber move that slows enemies when they're in it, but Slobber Trap is so slow that they just catch right back up. Now probably for the biggest surprise to me on this list, Nightshade. I found a new love for him. He's got three amazing moves. He has an absolutely great damage single hit swipe that'll steal money, but it also does fantastic damage. He can go invisible, and then he also has a lob throw that stuns medium and small enemies. Bruiser Cruiser. Bruiser Cruiser is definitely another disappointing one once you unlock them, because when you face him, he's actually decently difficult, punches fast, does good damage, but when you get to use him, his punches are super slow and hardly do any damage. Then he has an explosion move that rains down fireballs that barely do any damage as well. Chill Bill. Chill Bill is easily the most frustrating trappable villain to use because he has no real damaging attack. He has two moves that can slow and stun enemies, but doesn't really do any damage. His main attack is his freeze ray, which will freeze enemies, but if you shoot him again, it doesn't do any damage. And then his second move is a jump move that slows enemies, doing very minimal damage. So once you slow or stun, then what are you supposed to do? Broccoli Guy. Broccoli Guy is super useful and fun. He has two moves: a small close-range spell attack that does good damage, and a healing spell that heals your Skylanders. The spell stays around for about 10 seconds, healing for about 40 health every 3 seconds, but it also offers one piece of food per spell. Cuckoo Clocker. One of, if not the strongest villain you can use for single hit damage. His main attack's damage is based on how long you charge it up for, always doing great damage, but maxed charged damage is absolutely insane. And to make it even better, he has a scream move that stuns, so you can charge up that huge hit. The Chompy Mage. The Chompy Mage is definitely one of the best. His primary attack is a Staff Slam that does fantastic single hit damage. He has a Giant Chompy mode where he turns into a giant Chompy just like he did in Skylanders Giants and sends out fire waves, and they do great damage. But his worst attack is definitely spawning Chompies because they're about as strong as they were in SSA and they don't help you at all. Shredknot. They've got two moves. Their chainsaw that does fine damage but it doesn't last long. After a few seconds it stops and spins around, leaving you super vulnerable without an attack. And then they have their good damage single hit rocket. Mastermind. Mastermind has two moves. A main attack that does low damage, it can stun and also mind control enemies. And then a burst attack that does okay damage, but just really close to you. But a fun fact about Mastermind is, you can only mind control in levels. It does not work in Doom challenges. Bombshell. Bombshell's primary attack is a great damage bomb throw that does splash damage, and then his secondary attack is a good spin move. It lasts quite a while doing decent damage. Chef Pepperjack. A super underrated villain to play as. He has three great moves. A great damage exploding pepper throw that scatters around you, a forever lasting good damage speed move, and lastly a good damage flame breath that lasts as long as you don't get hit. Brawlrus. Just bad. He has two moves, which is a burst shot and a big spinning starfish shot, but neither of them do hardly any damage. Chomp Chest. Okay, he's great for that little gold hack in the first level, but gameplay wise he's not very helpful. Yeah, he can scan for gold if you can ever find any, but his bite move is super hard to aim and does not do great damage. Ice Cream. Ice Cream has two moves, big eyeball minions and small eyeball minions, both doing very little damage. I-5. Really disappointing for me. He has two moves, a very slow and low damage slams and a very close range shock attack that barely boosts his damage output and speed of his slam attack. Brawlin' Chain. Brawlin' Chain's primary attack is a good spin move that'll hit anybody around you, and his secondary attack is a yank move that does low damage, but it'll pull enemies closer to you so you can use your spin move again. Hoodsickle. I am so happy I learned how to use Hoodsickle because I never used to like him. He is so good. He has two moves, a really good damage dash that spawns ghosts, and a massive damaging swing. And all the ghosts that you just spawned act as little bombs, and they also explode, dealing a ton of damage. Pain-Yatta. Pain-Yatta's primary attack is a good damage slam attack with his lollipop. Then he also has a barf move that stuns enemies. And also with the barf, he can spawn a Pinata, and then you can hit that with the slam to do massive damage. Shield Shredder. Now this one is frustrating. He has two attacks and they could be good, but they're not. He has a fine damaging bash, but it's hard to aim. And he has a great damage, like two giant inaccurate shields come down, but for some reason they spawn behind him, and it makes no sense. It's so hard to hit an enemy with it. Frankenstein. His primary attack is a constant low damage fan attack that pulls enemies closer, but it will last forever until you get hit. And then his secondary attack, he'll pick up small to medium enemies and throw them for great damage. Rage Mage. Rage Mage has two moves, a very low damage primary attack, but it does stun small and medium enemies. And also she can spawn the Rage Ball. I know, everybody loves the Rage Ball, but it's really not that useful. It only lasts for about 10 seconds once you pick it up, but it does give you a slight boost in damage and speed. Scrap Shooter. Now I really want to like Scrap Shooter, but he has a couple things with two of his moves that keeps me from liking him. Listen, he's got a good fast shot attack for his primary, but it just doesn't last more than 6 seconds before you have to click the button again. It has to like do its little recharge. And then he has a fine damage spread shot, but it takes too long to do it, leaving you super vulnerable. Dr. Crankcase. If he did more damage, he would be one of the best. But his primary attack is the only thing that does good damage, and it's his little spin move, which doesn't last very long. Then he has a low damage goo and shock ability. The shock stuns, And the goo doesn't deal much damage, but it sticks to the ground and deals very small damage over time. Cross Crow. Cross Crow has a stationary forever shot. You never have to click the button ever again. You can just stay in one place. But if you're moving, it only comes out in bursts of 2. It does fine damage, but he also has a bird swoop attack. It only hits a single target, and it does very low damage. Blastertron. Thank goodness for Imaginators making him a sensei, because Trap Team version, not that great. His primary attack is a low damage blaster, but you could charge it up and it'll stun small to medium enemies while doing better damage. Then he has a charge move. It's fine, it doesn't cover too much area, but it does cause a knockback. Bone Chompy. And now a lot of people think that the regular Chompy and the Bone Chompy have the same moves and they're even. Wrong. They have different moves other than their primary attack. His primary attack is still very fast and does great damage. It's still the bite move. But now instead of spawning minions like the normal Chompy, he spawns traps on the ground that pop enemies up and do good damage, and they also stun. Threat Pack. Threat Pack is the hidden gem in the game. In turret sections, if you've ever had any issue, use Threat Pack. His missiles seek everything. But for his actual gameplay, he has a good damage rocket, but they do take a while to charge. I think he charges either 6 or 8, and they all do over 100 damage each, so they're great. And he also has a jump move, which does very small damage, but it also creates a knockback, so you can use your rockets again. The Great Hawkmungus. Nah, I'm just messing with you guys. Taekwon Crow. I love Taekwon Crow. He is super useful and super powerful with his primary attack. He uses his katana, does about 3 swipes that do massive damage. I think they're over 250 every swipe. Then he also has decent damage ninja stars he throws out, better for smaller enemies. And then you get closer with the sword and use that against the bigger enemies. Graveclobber. Graveclobber is actually really good. He has good damage punches, and then he has a great bone slam where bones come out of the ground and pop enemies up, but they also act as like a hex wall. It's really weird what they did with his element, that they made him earth, yet they gave him undead attacks and then made him water in Imaginators. Anyways, Graveclobber's great. Bad Juju. Bad Juju has 2 moves. A single damage lightning bolt that does good, and a tornado move that'll pull enemies medium and small into an area where you can use your lightning bolt and it strikes all of them at once. Golden Queen. Golden Queen is actually pretty good. She has a low damage spin move for her primary attack, but it works best with her secondary attack where she turns enemies to gold and then you can hit them for money. That's actually how I used to get money when I didn't know about Chomp Chest. Also, she has a really good turret that does good damage as well. Smokescream. Smokescream has 2 moves. He has great damage fire move that'll last forever. But then he has barrels that he can shoot, but they don't do any damage. They just stun medium and small enemies. Chaos. Now, I wasn't going to include him because we all know he's the best, but technically he is a trappable villain, so here he is. His main attack is 8 different elemental attacks that are all useful. They either stun, slow, or damage, not to mention his magic element attack that resets his whole meter so you can use him for as long as you want. He also has his floating head move with really good eye lasers and a slightly more powerful yell, and then his doom sharks that seek enemies, good damage, and it shoots about 5 at once. Lobgoblin. Lobgoblin is the definition of boring and no damage. He can throw those little shocky balls that always hit you when he's the enemy, but when you're him, they hardly do anything. Then he also has mines that aren't even really mines, but they link together and do a little shock, but it doesn't do anything. Now on to probably one of the most annoying trappable villains, and that is Dreamcatcher. Her main attack is a single hit tornado that does great damage. Her secondary attack is a vortex that sucks in enemies, and then you can hit them with your tornado. And then the third one is a minion that does great damage, but for some reason it's super hard to get it to actually hit something. Luminous. Luminous has 3 moves, 2 of them being excellent, and his primary attack I still don't like. His primary attack starts off going straight for about a second, and then it goes left and right and ends. It's not very good. but he also has a great turret that's long lasting and does great damage, and a massive damage crystal drop that you can use over and over. Just the classic Chompy. Now you guys are about to have your minds blown. He is one of the best playable villains. He has a great damage bite that you can use over and over really fast. Then he also can spawn little mini Chompies that bite when you bite all at once. I think you have like 9. So imagine your bite plus all of theirs at the same time over and over again. He is amazing with great damage output. Wolfgang. Wolfgang is one of the best, but he's also one of the easiest to use. He has 3 great attacks that all do amazing damage. He has a swipe hit, he's got his ranged attack with his music notes, and he also has a speed move, kind of, with his slide, but it also does great damage, so it makes up for it. Trolling Thunder. Trolling Thunder used to be my favorite as a kid. He has decent damage rockets, but they don't shoot very fast. But he has a great damage explosion move that also knocks back enemies. Mablobs. Mablobs is the good version of Lobgoblin. He has decent damage bombs, and then he also has little bombs that cover a large area doing a bunch of little explosions, but it can hit the same target multiple times doing good damage. Grenade. He's pretty much unusable. He has a single hit explosion that takes forever to load and then leaves you super vulnerable after it explodes. Then he has little minions, but they hardly do any damage. Fisticuffs. Fisticuffs' primary attack is just a decent damage punch, but it deals a knockback. And then for his secondary attack, he does fantastic damage with his fist drop that does splash damage so it can hit multiple enemies. Alright, so now it is finally time to put all 46 villains into the tier list. I know a lot of people are going to hate the way I do this, but it is just the way it's set up. It's not in the same, order as I went in the video, but it's the order that I took notes on them. So, Sheep Creep, C tier. Tussle Sprout, C tier. Slobber Trap, D tier. Broccoli Guy, A tier. Shredknot, C tier. Cuckoo Clocker, A tier. Gotta flip the page onto the next villains. Chef Pepperjack, S tier, our first S tier. Brawlrus, D tier. Chomp Chest, C tier. I5, C tier. I think there's a lot of C tiers if I remember. Hoodsickle, A tier. Shield Shredder, C tier. Rage Mage, C tier. Scrap Shooter, C tier. A lot of them are the definition of mid. It's very interesting. Crosscrow, C tier. Wolfgang joining the S tier. Threat Pack, A tier. Is there any B tiers? Oh, literally right now. Grave Clobber, B tier. Bad Juju, C tier. Smokescream, C tier. Nightshade, A tier. Lobgoblin, C tier. Next page. Chompy, surprise, A tier. Moblobs or Mablobs, whatever you want to call him, he's B tier. Trolling Thunder, my childhood favorite, B tier. Luminous, A tier. Chaos, S tier. Golden Queen, A tier. Bone Chompy, A tier. Taekwon Crow, our fourth S tier. Grenade, D tier. Blastertron, C tier. Dr. Crankcase, B tier. Fisticuffs, C tier. Crankenstein, C tier. Painata, A tier. Dreamcatcher, B tier. Ice Scream, D tier. Brawlin' Chain, C tier. Mastermind, C tier. Turn of the page to our last 6. Bombshell, C tier. Chill Bill, Disappointment, D tier. Chompy Mage, S tier. Bruiser Cruiser, D tier. Buzzerbeak, C tier. And the Gulper, D tier. Alright, so here is my tier list of all of the villains. You guys will see it right here. Now is where you want to pause the video and roast me in the comment section, because I know, everybody isn't going to agree with me 100%. So pause the video, take a look at this, and let me know what you agree with. Other than that, here's my tier list. Enjoy this. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate towards a few of these. Like putting Chill Bill as the worst trappable villain. That's treading on thin ice. Alright, and with that, I have ranked and placed in a tier list all trappable, playable villains from Skylanders Trap Team. Huge shout out to Mike and Oid for making this video possible. The audio files that I made up for this, actually ranking them or reviewing them, have been sitting on my computer for months, and because of recording issues I couldn't get the gameplay, but luckily he came in clutch, got the gameplay for me. So make sure you head over to his channel. He makes S tier content. It's fitting for this video to say S tier. But make sure you head over to Mike and Oid's channel, subscribe to him, watch all of his content, and then come back here. That's fine with me. Other than that, I hope you guys did enjoy. I know a lot of you guys probably disagreed with a lot, but that's why I do videos like this, so we can talk in the comments. Just keep it respectful. Other than that, thank you guys for watching, and keep saving Skylands.